Someone took a luxury motorhome and removed every single design compromise. Every one. That is not hyperbole. That is literally what you are looking at right now. Before we get into it, this is an AI-generated concept design. It does not exist in any factory. No one is building it. No one is selling it. It is pure imagination. And that is exactly why it is worth analyzing, because when you remove real-world constraints, you see what design could become. This concept, I am calling it the Phantom Hauler, is finished in a deep, iridescent navy black that shifts color depending on the angle of light. The proportions are unlike anything in the motorhome space. The front face looks like it was drawn by someone who designs supercars for a living. And there's one detail at the rear roofline of this vehicle, a decision I have genuinely not seen in this category before, and I am saving it for when we get there. Here's what we're covering: exterior walkaround, full interior deduction, powertrain logic, and my honest verdict. Let's go. Let's start at the front, because this is where the Phantom Hauler immediately tells you it is not playing by the same rules as everything else in this category. The front face opens with a razor-edged grille structure, hexagonal mesh, deep set, framed by what appears to be active air intake channels on either side. This is not decorative. In a real aerodynamic build, those channels would be managing high-pressure air hitting the face of the vehicle at highway speed and redirecting it around the body, rather than letting it stack up and create drag. What that means for you, living in this vehicle, is a quieter cabin at 70 miles per hour. Air management at the front is the single biggest contributor to wind noise inside a coach. Whoever designed this face understood that. Above the grille, the hood slopes forward at an aggressive rake. Motorhomes do not do this. They have flat faces, great for interior headroom, terrible for aerodynamics. This concept is making a deliberate trade. It is saying we will sacrifice some visual interior height at the front in exchange for a vehicle that cuts through the air like something with a purpose. I think that is the right call. The lighting signature above the grille appears to use a swan neck emblem flanked by two slash-cut DRL elements. That emblem placement, front and center, backlit, is a very deliberate signal about positioning. This concept is not pretending to be a mass-market vehicle. It is announcing itself. Now, move to the side profile, and I want you to pay attention to the roofline, because this is where things get genuinely interesting. The roofline does not follow the flat-top logic of conventional motorhomes. It crowns. It rises from the A-pillar, peaks at roughly the midpoint of the body, then descends gently toward the rear. That arc shape does two things. Aerodynamically, it reduces the turbulent wake behind the vehicle, the low-pressure zone that acts like a hand dragging the rear backward at speed. And visually, it gives this concept something no other motorhome concept I have analyzed has managed: genuine proportion elegance. It does not look like a box. It looks like something that moves even when it's standing still. This surface treatment is where this concept does something I have genuinely not seen before in AI-generated motorhome work. There's a white pinstripe graphic that runs from the front quarter panel in a V-shape, splitting toward the roofline and the lower body. It's not a stripe, it's a structural graphic. It's mimicking the crease lines you would find on a supercar body, and it's doing it at the scale of a 10-meter vehicle.
That kind of graphic confidence is rare. It takes a very specific design sensibility to pull off a graphic gesture that large without it looking like a decal from a caravan accessory shop. The wheels. Deep dish black alloys with a multi-spoke pattern sitting inside low-profile tires. This is a motorway concept. The tire profile tells you exactly what the designer imagined this vehicle doing. Long, high-speed highway cruising. Not gravel, not mountain passes, not off-grid terrain. Point-to-point luxury transit on fast roads. The stance is low, unusually low for a vehicle of this height, which means the suspension geometry being imagined here is air suspension, adaptive, doing the work of keeping that body planted and level. And then there's the roofline decision I mentioned in the hook. At the rear crown, there's a raised panel, a dorsal fin structure sitting proud of the main roof surface. In an engineered reality, this is where you integrate a solar array in an aerodynamically optimized housing, not flat-mounted panels that create turbulence, a sculpted housing that the air flows over and around. That's a detail that shows genuine systems thinking from whoever conceived this design. Form and function are being resolved simultaneously, not in conflict. I need you to follow me inside now, because the exterior is only half the story. Based on what these proportions are telling us, what's happening inside this concept is either extraordinary or deeply compromised, and I think I know which one it is.
Here is the thing about analyzing the interior of a concept that only exists as a render. You have to do detective work, and the exterior of this vehicle has left a trail of clues that is actually more revealing than most. Let me walk you through my deduction. The wheel diameter appears to be approximately 22 inches. Using that as a scale reference against the body height, I am estimating this vehicle sits at roughly 3.2 to 3.5 meters tall. That is significant. That gives us, once you account for the floor structure and ceiling liner, an interior standing height of somewhere between 2.0 and 2.2 meters in the primary living zone. That is generous. You are not ducking, you are not hunching, you are standing fully upright in what is effectively a moving apartment. Now the habitable length. Based on the wheelbase proportion, the front overhang, the rear overhang, the distance between the axles, this concept appears to span approximately 11 to 12 meters overall. Subtract the engine bay, the rear mechanical space, and the cockpit bulkhead, and you are working with roughly 7.5 to 8 meters of livable interior. Here is how I think a designer working at this aesthetic level would zone that space. The cockpit occupies approximately the first 1.8 meters behind the windshield. And here's what matters about the windshield angle on this concept. It is raked at a steeper pitch than any production coach I have seen. What that does to the driver's experience is remarkable. You are sitting in a command position that feels less like operating a vehicle and more like inhabiting the nose of a private aircraft. Visibility arc is panoramic, and given the design language on display here, I am confident the instrumentation is fully digital. No analog gauges, a single sweeping curved display spanning the full dash width, and steering column controls that require zero physical interaction with a dashboard panel. The lounge zone, the approximately 2.5 meters behind the cockpit. This is where the phantom hauler would either succeed or fail as a living concept. Given the glass-to-body ratio on the side profile and that high arc roofline, natural light in this zone would be extraordinary. I am imagining deep sectional seating in a dark leather,
charcoal or near black to match the exterior positioning, with a ceiling that carries ambient light strips following the crown of that roofline arc. You would feel the height, you would feel the space. This is not the cramped lounge of a conventional touring coach. This is a room that happens to be moving. The kitchen. Based on where the midpoint of the body falls and the likely placement of fresh and gray water infrastructure, the kitchen sits approximately at meter 5 from the cockpit bulkhead. The counter runs along the curb side, the side away from the driver, maximizing worktop depth. Induction only. There is no gas in a concept built at this positioning level. Gas means ventilation compromises, gas means safety systems, gas means visual hardware that clutters a designed kitchen. Induction gives you a completely flat, flush cooking surface that doubles as a preparation zone when not in use. Overhead storage is integrated flush with the ceiling panels. No visible hinges, no visible handles, just surfaces that respond to touch. The sleeping zone. This is where the concept makes its most interesting spatial bet. Position it at the rear, the full width of the body, and you get the maximum bed dimension. We are likely looking at a fixed island bed, queen or wider, oriented crosswise to the vehicle. What that means at night is this. You open your eyes, you are looking directly out of a rear window at whatever landscape you have parked in front of. You do not see any road infrastructure, you do not see the vehicle's mechanicals, you see the view. That is a design decision that costs nothing in imagination and is deeply meaningful in experience. The bathroom. I want to be honest about what the proportions allow here. The width of this concept appears to be approximately 2.4 to 2.5 meters. That is the constraint. In a full-width rear bedroom layout, the bathroom must occupy a separate zone, most likely a wet room format aft of the kitchen, curbside. Walk-in shower is feasible. The gray water system in a concept like this imagines a holding capacity that enables 3 to 4 days of independent use before a service connection is needed. The smart systems. Climate in a vehicle of this thermal mass and with that solar dorsal would be a learning system, not a thermostat. A system that reads the ambient forecast, the occupancy pattern, and the orientation of the vehicle to the sun and preconditions the interior before you arrive. You pull up to a park-up at 6 p.m. The interior is already at 21 degrees. The lighting is already at evening mode. The system knew when you were arriving because it was watching the route. What would it actually feel like to live in this concept? Imagine waking up, the rear of this vehicle framing a mountain pass or a coastline. The ceiling above you is gently lit, not bright, just present, following that crown arc down toward the windows. The air is exactly right. There is no road noise because the aerodynamics have done their work. This is not camping. This is not even glamping. This is a mobile architecture statement. Now let's talk about what makes all of this physically possible, the powertrain and systems logic underneath all that elegance.
If this were ever engineered for reality, the propulsion answer is full electric. There is no alternative at this design positioning level. Here's the logic. The acoustic experience of a diesel coach, that low-frequency vibration that lives in the floor and the walls, is fundamentally incompatible with what the phantom hauler is trying to be. Full electric eliminates that. You get propulsive silence. The cabin is no longer sharing a body with a combustion engine. It is sharing a body with a battery pack and two motors, which produce no vibration, no heat waste into the cabin, and no exhaust management requirements. In a real-world build scenario, you would be looking at a battery capacity in the 400 to 600 kilowatt-hour range. To put that in perspective, the longest-range heavy electric coaches currently operating commercially carry approximately 350 to 400 kilowatt-hours. This concept, given its scale and the performance its proportions suggest, would need the upper end of that range, around 500 to 550 kilowatt-hours, to deliver a credible 300-mile range between charges under real conditions. That is a substantial pack, but the technology to build it exists today. The solar dorsal at the rear crown. I want to be precise about what this realistically contributes. A well-optimized roof-mounted solar array in a housing of that approximate scale would generate somewhere in the region of 2 to 3 kilowatts under ideal conditions. That is not range extension. That is interior systems sustaining, climate control at idle, lighting, connectivity, smart systems, allowing the concept to sit off-grid for extended periods without drawing from the main traction battery. It extends your independent range meaningfully, even without adding usable driving distance. Dual motor, dual axle. The front and rear axle each carry an independent motor. What that means practically, the vehicle can vector torque independently to each end, improving stability at motorway speed and giving low-speed maneuverability that a single rear-drive coach cannot match. It also means genuine low-speed off-road capability, not aggressive terrain, but gravel tracks, unpaved sites, mild elevation gradients that would strand a conventional coach. Autonomous highway mode. This is where the technology does not fully exist yet, but the closest equivalent is Level 3 highway automation. The system drives, you monitor, and you can disengage safely within a defined response window. In a concept of this scale, with that panoramic cockpit architecture, Level 3 highway autonomy transforms the cockpit from a driving position into a living space for 80% of a long journey. The technology to make this real is either already here or 18 months away. That is worth sitting with. Let me give you my verdict. Let me be direct with you. What this concept does genuinely well, and I mean this seriously, is roofline resolve. That crowning arc, paired with the solar dorsal housing at the rear, is the single most cohesive design decision in this concept. It is not decorative. It is not added for visual drama. It is a design decision where form and function have been resolved simultaneously. And the result is something that looks inevitable, like it could not have been any other way. That is difficult to achieve. Most AI-generated concepts nail the surface drama and ignore the system's logic underneath. This one got the balance right at the roofline. What seems impractical, and I want to be honest here because vague praise is useless, is the front rake. That sloped hood is beautiful. It is genuinely beautiful, but it costs interior height at the cockpit bulkhead, and in a living vehicle, that is a real trade. The driver's headroom in that raked nose is going to be compromised by approximately 5 degrees and recover 80 millimeters of headroom. I would make that change. The most impressive single detail, the pinstripe graphic.
That white V graphic running from the quarter panel, splitting toward the roofline and the lower body, is a level of graphic confidence I haven't seen in this category. Whoever conceived that understood that graphic design at the scale of a motorhome is closer to architecture than to vehicle badging. It earns its place completely. What does this concept signal about where luxury mobility is heading? It signals that the category is finally willing to have an honest conversation about what a motorhome should aspire to. Not convenience plus comfort, but genuine design resolution, architecture that moves. And I think that conversation is about 5 years from producing something real. It's a concept, it's fictional, it's AI generated, and it's still one of the most resolved motorhome concepts I've analyzed on this channel. Here's my question for you, and I want a real answer in the comments. Solar dorsal roof or a larger traction battery? Which would you prioritize for off-grid living? They are not the same answer, and there's a genuinely right one depending on how you travel. Tell me which camp you're in. If this kind of design analysis is what you come to YouTube for, subscribing is simply the most efficient way to not miss the next concept. New one drops soon, and it makes this one look modest.